As Emily and her young son made their way to the notary's office, a seemingly ordinary day was marred by a shocking discovery. Her eyes fell upon her husband, brazenly entwined with his mistress, a sight that cut through her with the precision of a blade. The revelation of her father's bequest had already cast a shadow over her heart, and the thought of visiting the notary's office felt like an insurmountable burden, especially with her precious William to care for. At just 7 years old, he was a tender, vulnerable soul, and his very presence was a constant source of worry for her. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Mama, where are we going? Are we heading to the store or the park? I'd like to visit the park, William chirped with innocent enthusiasm. His eyes sparkled with anticipation as he described the lively scene of squirrels frolicking and wild ducks and swans gracefully gliding across the water. Emily managed a weary smile in response, her heart heavy. No, darling, we're not going to the store or the park today. We're on our way to Uncle Notary's office to handle Grandpa James's inheritance. Well, it's my father's estate, she gently explained. Oh, I understand a little bit. But Mom, is Grandpa James already in heaven? William inquired with a look of innocent curiosity. Emily's shoulders sagged as she gave a slight shrug. I believe so. Grandpa James was always kind-hearted, helping out little houses and homeless animals, she replied, her voice tinged with sadness. William, though still grappling with the concept, nodded in agreement, though his young mind continued to ponder. Is it because of Grandpa that homeless dogs have those yellow tags? Yes, that's right. The tags mean the dogs are vaccinated and safe to be around. They don't just wander, they're usually near the shelter, Emily explained, though her thoughts were far from these innocent exchanges. William, lost in daydreams, imagined a future where he could have his dog, a small beacon of joy amidst the current turmoil. Emily's mind, meanwhile, was tangled in a web of anxiety and regret. The impending meeting with the notary loomed over her like a dark cloud. The prospect of uncovering what her father had left behind was a painful reminder of his absence, a subject that pierced her heart more deeply than any other. The reality of managing her father's estate was a far cry from the life she had envisioned for herself, a life surrounded by the glamour of a beauty salon, or, at the very least, the bustling charm of a restaurant. Instead, she found herself at the helm of a construction firm, a world of complexities and challenges that often seemed alien to her. The weight of responsibility felt like a relentless storm, each new problem adding to her sense of being cursed by fate. The recent upheaval of her marriage only compounded her distress. Her husband had shown his true colors the moment her father passed away, immediately aligning himself with his mistress with a blatant disregard for decency. It was an act of audacity he would never have dared under James's vigilant gaze. James Albertson had been a man of formidable presence, his reputation as a shrewd and unyielding businessman casting a long shadow. His mere presence had been enough to intimidate even the most audacious, and Emily couldn't help but feel the sting of his absence even more acutely now. A month ago, Emily and her stepmother Olivia had received the heart-wrenching news of James Albertson's untimely demise, a tragic consequence of relentless overwork and ceaseless business trips. His heart, unable to withstand the constant strain of negotiations and endless travel, had finally given out, leaving behind a void that seemed impossible to fill. Emily sighed deeply, the weight of her grief mingling with the burden of the day ahead as she crossed the street toward the notary's office. At a different time, Emily might have driven to the meeting, but circumstances had drastically changed. Just before her father's passing, a significant financial crisis had struck his once thriving business. To alleviate some of his mounting debts, Emily had been forced to sell her car. The decision, though practical, had not been easy, but she accepted it with a sense of resignation. The absence of her car was a minor inconvenience in the grand scheme of things, overshadowed by the enormity of the situation. As Emily and William approached their destination, her son's innocent voice pierced through her somber reflections. "Mama, look." "Daddy's red car is parked there," William said, pointing with a mixture of curiosity and excitement. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she glanced in the direction he indicated. Indeed, there was Oscar's car, a symbol of his extravagant lifestyle. He had never hesitated to spend lavishly, and his current audacity only underscored the gulf that had grown between them. Once intimidated by her father's formidable presence, Oscar now seemed emboldened by James's absence. Attempting to maintain her composure, Emily began to ascend the steps to the notary's office, William in tow. The young boy, still grasping the gravity of the situation, followed her with a trustful innocence. As Emily opened the door, her breath caught in her throat at the sight before her. There stood Oscar, with a younger woman draped around him, their embrace a stark reminder of the betrayal she had been grappling with. "Oh, look who finally arrives, Emily. Sophie and I have been here for ages." "The early bird catches the worm," Oscar remarked with a smirk that was anything but reassuring. "Well, it's easy to be early when you don't have to worry about footing the bill," Emily shot back, her voice tinged with disdain. Oscar's scoff was a predictable response. "And whose bill is that?" "Exactly. Your father left me a share too. I practically lived with you for 5 years, more like endured it, but that's beside the point. Your dad decided to show his appreciation for tolerating such a difficult wife," Oscar sneered. "My mother is not a difficult woman, and you're a traitor," William exclaimed with righteous anger, his small fists clenched. Oscar's smirk only widened. "Oh, the little defender has grown up. I always said that kids from the orphanage never truly become part of the family," he taunted, his words a cruel jab. Emily's eyes burned with fury as she confronted her estranged husband. "Who put those vile words in your mouth? Do you have no one else to confide in? William is my son, and your opinions about him are irrelevant." "That's your problem, Emily. I always speak my mind, unlike you and your father, who were always scheming behind closed doors." "Look where that got you," Oscar retorted with biting irony. His companion, Sophie, chuckled dismissively, her gaze filled with disdain. "How dare you speak of my father like that? Without him, you'd still be a laborer on a construction site. Who made you a foreman? Who taught you everything?" Emily's voice rose in a mixture of anger and desperation. The tension in the notary's office reached a boiling point, the air thick with unresolved conflict and unspoken grievances. Just as it seemed a full-blown argument was inevitable, the office door swung open, and the elderly notary stepped in with the authority of a mediator. "Enough with the quarrels," he said, his voice steady and commanding. "Notary offices are hardly the place for such disputes. To avoid further discord, I'll state the facts clearly. James Albertson has left all his business and financial assets to Oscar Barlow, the late Olivia Albertson's husband. Olivia retains all the real estate, including the coastal cottage." Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding as the notary's words sank in. The shock of the announcement hit her like a tidal wave, leaving her momentarily paralyzed. The experienced notary had laid it all out in one swift, painful blow, clearly aiming to prevent any further family discord. "What? Do all the business and assets go to him? To this scoundrel, this womanizer?" Emily's voice trembled with incredulity and anger. "I suppose you mean yourself, darling. You're nobody now, but my Oscar is a wealthy heir," Sophie said with a dismissive tone, her words like salt in an open wound. Oscar's smirk grew more pronounced as he looked at Emily with a mixture of triumph and challenge. Although their divorce had not yet been finalized, it seemed inevitable. Emily's world had been turned upside down. Her plans to divorce Oscar had been in the works for months, but circumstances had always thwarted her efforts. They had been living separately for some time, and it was clear their marriage was irreparable. Now, the shocking revelation that her father had bequeathed all his savings to Oscar was almost too much to bear. The thought of James Albertson, a man known for his shrewdness and integrity, making such a decision was unfathomable. Emily's mind raced with questions. Had her father been under some form of coercion or manipulation? The answers eluded her, leaving her with a profound sense of confusion and betrayal. Emily Albertson, why the silence? You're entitled to something as well. Your late father didn't overlook you, the notary's voice cut through the tense atmosphere, a lifeline in the sea of confusion. Emily lifted her gaze, meeting the notary's steady eyes with a mixture of apprehension and hope. And what am I to inherit? The notary adjusted his horn-rimmed glasses with a clinical detachment. You inherit the country house, along with the adjacent land and outbuildings. A heavy silence descended upon the office, its weight palpable. Even the secretary seemed frozen mid-typing, as if the gravity of the moment had seized her. Emily's mind raced, struggling to grasp the implications of the notary's words. She repeated the question, but the answer only deepened her despair. Is this truly what my father intended when he wrote his will, she thought, a wave of disbelief washing over her. The mention of the house evoked a sense of dread rather than relief. William, sensing his mother's turmoil, pressed closer, his small frame trembling with concern. Well, Emily, are you satisfied with your inheritance? Did Daddy's choice meet your expectations? Oscar's voice was laced with a mocking tone, his smirk a painful reminder of the betrayal. Yes, Oscar, he got it right, Emily replied, her voice quivering with a mix of hurt and resignation. Her ex-husband's smirk widened, a cruel twist of the knife. I bet you've never even seen the house. I have. Let me tell you, it's far from impressive. It's on the brink of collapse, a mere shadow of what it once was, a house of cards. A barn, a well, and nothing more. I hope you're thrilled with it, Oscar taunted, his words a brutal blow. Emily took the documents and keys from the notary's desk, her hands trembling as she turned to leave with William. Outside, the harsh reality of the situation overwhelmed her. Emily buried her face in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks in silent despair. Mom, why are you crying? Everything's okay, right? Are you upset about the house? William's anxious voice broke through her grief. Emily shook her head, unable to find the words to explain the profound sense of betrayal and loss. How could she tell her young son that his grandfather had left him with nothing of real value? The incongruity of it all seemed too much to bear. Emily had always believed that her father would ensure her future, but instead, he had bequeathed his substantial real estate holdings to Olivia, a woman who had been with him for only 10 years, a short span in the grand scheme of things. The thought of living with Olivia, who had always harbored a visible disdain for her stepdaughter, was unbearable. Yet Emily had never sought to provoke conflict with the woman. If her father had chosen Olivia, there must have been reasons known only to him. The situation felt like a cruel twist of fate, leaving Emily to grapple with her father's unexpected decision and the uncertain future that lay ahead. Having spent roughly a year in James's home, Olivia had gradually begun to impose her own rules with an air of unceremonious authority. It started with the kitchen, where she had made it clear to Emily that her culinary skills were no longer needed. Sorry, dear, but I'm rather tired of your cooking. Why slave away in the kitchen when you could just order from a restaurant? Olivia would remark, her tone cold and dismissive, making it abundantly clear that Emily's presence was no longer desired. Emily's hopeful glances toward her father went unnoticed, as he remained engrossed in what he did best, managing his business empire. Emily, meanwhile, had taken up the mantle of running his charitable foundations and assisting those in need. The memory of her visit to the notary's office seemed distant and fragmented, a jumbled puzzle of regret and confusion. William walked quietly beside her, his youthful intuition sensing the gravity of the situation. The smart boy understood that something significant had occurred that morning, something that would irrevocably alter their lives. As Emily opened the door to their home, an uneasy feeling gripped her. She was greeted by the sight of a middle-aged man, seemingly in his 50s, who was cozied up with Olivia in the living room. It had only been a month since her father's passing. The audacity and insensitivity of their behavior left Emily reeling. How could they be so shameless, so brazenly disrespectful of her father's memory? Olivia's barely concealed smirk as she spotted Emily only deepened Emily's suspicions. It almost seemed as if Olivia was aware of the will's contents, which might explain her unrestrained, provocative demeanor. Emily's thoughts raced. Look at her, hosting a romantic rendezvous amid this chaos. Wine, restaurant dishes, probably celebrating the inheritance she thought bitterly. Turning to William, she said, "Sweetheart, we're leaving. Pack your things into your backpack, and I'll get the suitcases ready." William looked up at his mother, confusion etched on his young face. "Leaving? Where are we going?" "To the countryside, to the property Grandpa left us." "What else is there for us to do here?" Emily replied, her voice trembling with emotion. William nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation, and scampered off to pack his belongings. Olivia, with a slightly tipsy tone, called out, "Emily, are you leaving somewhere?" "Yes, we're leaving. There's nothing left for us here," Emily responded curtly. "Oh, should I help you call a taxi or something?" Olivia persisted with an insincere tone. "No thanks. I'm quite capable of calling a taxi myself," Emily snapped, her frustration palpable. Packing took about half an hour, during which Emily felt as though she was fighting against herself and the harsh circumstances that had transformed her life. She had always imagined that her father would leave his business and assets to her. It was a given in her mind that parents would pass on their best to their children. Yet James Albertson had done the exact opposite, leaving everything to Oscar. Perhaps her father had always longed for a son and saw Oscar as his successor. If that were true, it was a devastating misjudgment. Pushing aside these dark thoughts, Emily picked up a suitcase and made her way to the exit, where an elderly taxi driver awaited them in a conspicuous yellow car. She provided him with the address of their new destination. "Of course, please take a seat." "I'll make sure everything is taken care of," the driver said with a friendly bustle. Emily nodded and settled into the back seat with William. She had a vague sense of the village's location, just a short drive from the city by a river, a small forest, and vast fields that belonged to local farmers. William, his face pressed against the window, marveled at the passing trucks with unbridled excitement. His genuine wonder at the world beyond the city limits brought a small, wistful smile to Emily's face. "And are you planning to stay in the village permanently, or is this just a visit?" the taxi driver inquired. Emily shrugged uncertainly. "I'm not sure. We'll see how things turn out. It might be permanent." The driver's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Oh, I've been there many times. It's a perfect spot for relaxation, mushrooms, fishing, and the land is so fertile. Anything you plant will grow." "Well, we're not attached to the land. I was studying to be a teacher, but never ended up working in a school. My dad wanted me to become a businesswoman, but it didn't quite work out," Emily confessed, a hint of embarrassment in her voice. "Ah, well, that can be changed. Where there's a will, there's a way," the driver said encouragingly. "Yeah, nothing is set in stone. We'll see once we get there," Emily concluded, her voice a mixture of hope and uncertainty. The road gently unfurled into the horizon, like a delicate ribbon fluttering in a summer breeze, as the car meandered smoothly along its path. The simple joy of travel seemed momentarily comforting. By the time they reached the village, the afternoon sun cast a warm but weary light over their arrival. The locals, with their wary eyes and hushed whispers, greeted the conspicuous taxi with a mixture of curiosity and reserve. In such a quaint and insular community, Every new arrival was a topic of interest and speculation, ripe for conversation and analysis. Emily's heart sank as she glimpsed the village before her. The modest, time-worn houses, their sloped roofs and tiny windows, seemed to taunt her expectations. The vibrant scene of barking dogs and wandering geese, mingling with chickens pecking at the earth, painted a picture that was far from the charming ideal she had envisioned. As the taxi came to a stop, Emily's hopes of a fresh start seemed to fade. Handing the driver the address, she waited with a mixture of apprehension and resignation. The house that awaited her was a shadow of its former self, an old relic of better days now weathered and forlorn. "Mom, is this where we're going to live now?" William's voice trembled with disbelief, his young eyes wide with confusion. "Yes, sweetheart," Emily replied with a forced calmness. "Not just live, but perhaps work as well." "At least I will." Her response caught the elderly taxi driver off guard, his curiosity piqued. "Well, if you need anything, just give me a shout. I'll leave you my number, just in case," the driver offered, handing Emily a folded slip of paper with a gentle smile. "Thank you," Emily said, offering him payment for his service. The driver, kind-hearted as he was, helped carry their heavy suitcases to the doorstep before bidding them farewell. "All right, I've done all I can." "Take care," he said with a hint of finality in his voice. "Goodbye, Uncle Taxi Driver. Come back if you can," William called out as the man departed. Emily smiled faintly, turning to unlock the door. To her astonishment, it swung open on its own, causing William to flinch and step back in surprise. "Mom, is there a ghost in there?" William's voice was laced with fear. Emily's unease matched her son's. She peered into the dimly lit hallway, her heart pounding. "Hello? Who's there? If you don't come out, I'll call the police." Her voice quivered, trying to sound more authoritative than she felt. A faint, weary cough echoed through the hallway, followed by a frail, weary voice. "Oh, come now, dears. The police? We've only got one constable for the entire district. If you call, you'll be waiting till evening or even until morning. It's a gamble." "And who might you be, Grandpa?" The house spirit William's question cut through the uncertainty. The old man chuckled softly, emerging from the shadows with a resigned air. "Oh no, my young friend. I'm George Blair, once the headmaster of the village school. Now I'm just an old pensioner whose days are spent in this forgotten house." Emily's face grew pale. "But what about the inheritance?" "This is my late father's house, James Albertson. I have all the legal documents and keys. Everything's in order." George Blair stepped fully into the light, revealing a slender, frail figure in his 80s. "James passed away. I had no idea. What a tragedy. He was such a kind, honorable man." Seeing tears forming in the old man's eyes, Emily's heart softened. "Did you know my father well?" George nodded solemnly. "Indeed, I did. I didn't just know him, I practically raised him. I taught him math, algebra, and geometry. He was always exceptionally bright. Rest his soul, and you must be his daughter." Emily, feeling a mix of embarrassment and gratitude, responded, "Yes, I'm Emily, and this is my son, William." The old man's face lit up with a warm, nostalgic smile. "What a fine lad. He has the same spark as his father. I always had an eye for talent in my students." "Thank you," Emily replied with a hint of discomfort. She chose not to elaborate on the fact that William was adopted, a detail she preferred to keep private. "Don't worry," Emily, George said with a sigh. "I'll pack up and leave today so I won't be a burden. James was kind enough to let me stay here once, but it seems my time has come to an end." Emily felt a pang of guilt. It didn't seem right to turn the old man out when he had no other place to go. "Wait, George, don't leave. If Dad wanted you to stay here, then you should. Stay with us." George looked at her with a mix of skepticism and surprise. "Oh, I don't want to be a burden. You'll be settling in as a family. I have my challenges, but I do have a decent pension. If you need anything, I'm here to help." Emily's resolve hardened. The house, with all its creaky floors and faded memories, would now have another layer of history and heartache to add to its walls. "Well, that's wonderful news. Since you don't mind, why don't you stay with us indefinitely? We're new here and don't know anyone. You can be our guide," Emily suggested with a warm, encouraging smile, carefully sidestepping the issue of her estranged husband. What else could she say? She hadn't yet divorced her unfaithful husband, who had squandered her father's inheritance. No, Emily had no complaints about the legalities. Everything was well documented and above board. "Thank you, Emily. You're incredibly generous. You've taken me in and given me a place when I had nowhere else to go. My daughter-in-law kicked me out after her husband, my son, passed away. It wasn't sudden, though. It was a slow and painful process. First, she took away my room, then moved me to the living room, then to the summer kitchen. Eventually, it led to the harsh reality of homelessness. It's a disgrace for a former school principal. I continued to work until my health began to fail me," George Blair recounted with a deep sense of loss. Emily's expression darkened with concern. "How could someone do that to an elderly person? You should have called the authorities, or rather, the local constable," she said, her voice laced with sympathy. George Blair waved off the suggestion with a weary gesture. "Ah, Emily, what good would that have done? I've reevaluated many things in recent times. I hold no ill will towards my daughter-in-law. Ultimately, it's up to God to judge her actions. I am grateful, though, for the times I got to see my grandchildren. She wanted to place me in a nursing home. You know, for the elderly. I refused. I couldn't bear the thought of living without the presence of children. Every year on September 1st, I would visit the school and cry. I'd watch the children in their uniforms and feel a deep, aching joy." "Why are you crying, Grandpa? Is something hurting, or do you not like school?" William asked with innocent curiosity. George Blair wiped away a tear, his smile tinged with both sorrow and joy. "Oh dear, I'm crying tears of joy. Seeing the children heading to school in their uniforms fills me with such bittersweet happiness. 5 years ago, they threatened to close our school, claiming it was too old. I fought fiercely against that, going to the city and submitting complaints and petitions. Thanks to your late father, James, who helped with transportation and was generally a good soul, we managed to keep it open." Emily looked at George with newfound respect and admiration, her heart warmed by his dedication. She suggested they explore the house, and to her surprise, it was immaculate. Every corner was spotless, with not a speck of dust or cobweb in sight. It was as if the house had been meticulously prepared for their arrival. Emily couldn't help but feel a pang of envy at such perfect order maintained by the elderly man. William, too, found the house enchanting, as if it were the home of a benevolent wizard from a fairy tale. It turned out that George Blair had been staying in a tiny room, reluctant to fully occupy the house. "About work, could you suggest something that might suit me?" Emily asked with interest. "Well, it depends on your skills and interests. There's a position available at the post office, or perhaps work on a farm milking cows or tending to poultry. If you have the qualifications, the local school is in desperate need of teachers. The new principal keeps threatening to shut it down." Oblivious to the fact that many families don't have reliable transportation to get there, George Blair said with a fervor that spoke of his deep concern for the village. Emily felt a surge of determination. Perhaps this new chapter in their lives could bring unexpected opportunities and connections. "School that fits me perfectly. True, I've never worked in this field before, but wasn't it a waste to study pedagogy for so many years, if not to use it?" Emily said with a hopeful smile. "Wow, my mom is going to be a teacher," William exclaimed with unrestrained joy. "Well, that's a pleasant surprise. I'm sure the local school will be delighted to have you," George Blair observed with genuine approval. "Well, that remains to be seen. They might not hire me, or I might not be able to take on the role. Life is full of uncertainties," George added with a knowing smile as he began to set the table for their meal. Before their arrival, he had boiled potatoes and prepared a simple salad of cucumbers and tomatoes. Nothing extravagant, but when you're famished for travel, such fare is precisely what you need. "Here you go, eat up. Everything is homegrown. It might not be much, but it's nourishing. I tend to the land and enrich it with manure and compost come fall. This way, I prepare enough for the entire week. Just a few potatoes, a cucumber, simple but satisfying," George said with a caring tone. "Oh, this is delicious, Grandpa George. You could lick your fingers clean," William said with his mouth full, clearly enjoying the meal. George Blair beamed with pride. Eat up, eat up. You need to grow strong, you're rather thin. Though your grandfather James was much the same until high school. Then he bulked up and took up sports," George added, reminiscing fondly. Emily's cheeks flushed with discomfort. She regarded William as her son, no doubts, no questions. She had adopted him nearly 7 years ago when his biological mother abandoned him. Emily had long yearned for a child, and the doctors had given her the devastating news 3 years prior that she could not conceive. Faced with the prospect of a future without children, Emily made the bold decision to adopt William, despite the lack of support from her estranged husband, Oscar. The situation was further complicated by the fact that William had been born with a pinched nerve in his leg, potentially leaving him permanently disabled. Back then, Oscar had expressed disdain. "Why would you want a crippled child? Can't you find someone normal?" Oscar had said with a sneer. "How can you be so heartless? He's just a child. Can't you show even a shred of compassion?" Emily had retorted through tears. "Compassion? Maybe I have some, but it's for myself. Who will care for me? Nobody. You're willing to devote yourself to some handicapped boy instead of focusing on me," her husband had snapped. Emily quickly realized that she could not rely on Oscar for support, but the thought of leaving William behind was unthinkable. "Can't you, little one, take care of yourself? This child needs help. He might even need corrective surgery," Emily had pleaded. "Well, if you're so set on it, you take care of it. I have other matters to attend to," Oscar had declared, slamming the door behind him. Emily, determined, had moved forward with her plan. She had secured guardianship over the 3-month-old William and found one of the best pediatric orthopedic specialists, ensuring the boy received the necessary care. Throughout, Emily had never revealed William's adoption status, cherishing him as her own and loving him unconditionally. James, though reserved, had been supportive of his daughter's decision, glad to have a grandchild, even if by adoption. "Oh, Dad, why did you leave the inheritance to that traitor? What were you thinking?" Emily thought sorrowfully. After washing up and clearing the table, she had no inkling that Oscar was at that very moment contemplating his machinations. "So everything worked out perfectly, huh? Did the old man hand over the whole estate to me?" Oscar asked with a smug grin, addressing his new lover, Sophie. Sophie looked at him with curiosity. "Yes, you could say that. And honestly, how did you manage it?" she inquired. Oscar's smile widened into a cunning smirk. "Oh, it was quite straightforward. I made a deal with the notary and intercepted Albertson's will. He handed it over to me himself. He was on his deathbed, relying on me, and I took full advantage. I forged the will and persuaded the notary," Oscar explained, his tone dripping with satisfaction. Sophie's eyes widened in surprise. "But how did you manage to get the notary to agree?" "Isn't that illegal?" she asked, puzzled. Oscar snorted in derision. "Ah, you're so naive, Sophie. The notary's son was involved in a high-profile car accident. The investigation found him guilty, and I got hold of the dashcam footage." "What dashcam footage?" Sophie asked, still confused. Oscar sighed, exasperated. "The footage from the car's dashboard camera. Many drivers have them, and I managed to find a witness. I bought the recording and showed it to the notary." "And did he agree?" Sophie pressed. "Of course. What choice did he have? The footage was the key evidence in the case against his son. Once he saw it, all charges were dropped, and the real culprit disappeared. The notary had no option but to comply," Oscar said with a self-satisfied grin. Sophie gazed at him with admiration. "Wow, you're a real strategist and thinker," she said, clearly impressed. Oscar basked in the praise. "Well, what can I say? I played my cards right. I took advantage of the situation and secured the inheritance without unnecessary fuss," he said, feeling like the master of his destiny. Oscar gave little thought to why his father-in-law had trusted him on his deathbed. Was it truly the only choice? Oscar dismissed it as the effects of painkillers, never suspecting the full scope of his actions. Despite the restless night in a new place, Emily decided to make the most of the opportunity. After a simple breakfast, she headed to the local school, intent on discussing potential work. While she knew that the summer break meant she wouldn't be able to officially start until September, she felt that initiating a conversation about her qualifications and interests wouldn't hurt. After all, making a good impression could only benefit her prospects. Principal Thomas Brown greeted Emily with a cautious demeanor, his eyes reflecting a mix of suspicion and apprehension. It wasn't every day that a city woman showed up unannounced, and he couldn't help but wonder about her intentions. Was she here for an inspection, or perhaps to challenge the status quo? The thought of losing his position, his little kingdom, was unsettling. Thomas had grown accustomed to his role as the village's chief figure, where everyone looked up to him and he wielded significant influence. As he reviewed Emily's credentials, Thomas weighed his options. On one hand, he could dismiss her application on some trivial grounds, but that might create a future adversary. On the other hand, it was better to have her under his watchful eye than to risk her spreading unfavorable rumors that could lead to unwelcome scrutiny. He decided that it would be more prudent to keep Emily close and make the best of the situation. "Well, your qualifications and background seem solid," Thomas said, masking his internal reservations with a veneer of professionalism. "We could certainly use someone like you on our team. To help you get acclimated, I'd like you to work with a special student of ours." Emily's curiosity was piqued. "A special student? What do you mean?" Thomas leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "We have a boy named Oliver Carroll. He's repeating the second grade due to some difficulties with his studies. Oliver lives with his father, who's a wheelchair user. His father lost his legs in a car accident and now manages everything on his own after his wife left. The village does what it can to support them." Emily listened intently, absorbing the details. "And what role would I play in this?" Thomas continued, "I'd like you to work with Oliver on extra lessons. The goal is to help him catch up so he's better prepared for the next school year." Understanding dawned on Emily. "Ah, I see. I'm more than willing to help with that. Whenever you're ready, we can get started." Thomas nodded approvingly. "Excellent. There's no need to delay. We'll start today. I'll inform Oliver's father, and you can wait in the 7th room. Oliver should be here shortly. He lives nearby." Emily agreed and left for the corridor, eager to begin. Her patience was rewarded when, soon after, a breathless boy burst into the room, clutching a stack of notebooks. "Hello, may I come in? Is this where the extra lessons for second graders are held?" Yes, Oliver, that's right. But it's more for students who need extra help rather than just those in the second grade. My name is Emily, and I'll be working with you. Let's start right away. Can you show me where you left off before your vacation? Emily said with a warm, encouraging tone. Oliver, though a bit shy, nodded and opened his textbook to the relevant page. As he began solving problems and answering questions, Emily observed with growing interest. Despite the principal's portrayal of Oliver as struggling, Emily noted that his knowledge seemed quite average, certainly not below par. She wondered why such a sweet, quiet boy had been held back. Determined to understand better, Emily gently started asking Oliver questions about his difficulties and experiences. The boy hesitated at first, but soon began to open up. He talked about the challenges of balancing school with helping his father at home, and how he sometimes felt overwhelmed by the dual demands on his time. Emily listened attentively, realizing that his struggles were not necessarily a reflection of his abilities but rather a result of external pressures. This insight only strengthens Emily's resolve to help Oliver succeed. She saw potential in him and was committed to providing the support he needed to thrive in the upcoming school year. Emily's heart raced as she recognized Oscar's red car parked on the street. The sight of it brought a wave of anxiety, and she quickened her pace, dreading the confrontation she could sense was about to unfold. As she approached, she could hear Oscar's angry voice cutting through the air, unmistakably familiar and brimming with hostility. Oscar was shouting at Oliver, who stood in the yard looking frightened. The boy had wandered too close to the scene of the commotion, and Oscar's anger seemed to be directed at him, not sparing any harsh words. The situation was quickly escalating, with Oscar's voice growing louder and more aggressive. George Blair, who had been trying to intervene, looked helplessly at the scene unfolding. In his wheelchair, he was at a distinct disadvantage, unable to physically confront the imposing figure of Oscar. Emily's heart ached at the sight of George, who was trying to protect Oliver, struggling against Oscar's tirade. Seeing that things were spiraling out of control, Emily rushed forward, her presence seemingly a calming effect on the situation. She called out, trying to get Oscar's attention. "Oscar, what are you doing here?" Oscar turned sharply, his face contorted with anger. "Emily, what a surprise. I didn't expect to see you here." "What's going on?" Emily demanded, her voice firm as she looked between Oscar and Oliver. "Why are you shouting at this boy?" Oscar sneered, his anger not diminishing. "This boy's father is a worthless, legless man who thinks he's owed something. I'm just giving him a piece of my mind." Emily's eyes widened with shock and concern. "You have no right to speak to him like that. This is unacceptable." George Blair, seizing the moment, spoke up with a newfound strength. "Oscar, you should leave. This is not your place. You have no business here, and you're upsetting everyone." Oscar's anger seemed to momentarily focus on George, his scowl deepening. "And who are you to tell me what to do? Just a washed-up old man who thinks he's still relevant." Emily stepped between them, her voice steady and authoritative. "Oscar, enough. Leave now. If you don't, I'll call the authorities." Oscar's face darkened, and he glared at Emily with a mix of rage and frustration. "Fine, I'll go. But this isn't over." With that, Oscar stormed back to his car, slamming the door behind him with violent force. The sound of the engine revving up was almost deafening as he sped away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Emily turned back to George and Oliver, her face pale but determined. "Are you both all right?" Oliver, still shaken, nodded. "I'm okay. Thank you for coming. I didn't know what to do." George looked up at Emily, his expression filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Emily. I didn't know what would have happened if you hadn't intervened." Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I'm just glad I got here in time. Oscar's behavior was unacceptable, and I'm sorry you had to experience that. As she helped George and Oliver back inside, Emily felt a deep sense of resolve. Despite the troubles she faced with her ex-husband, she was determined to stand up for what was right and support those in need. The experience with Oscar had only strengthened her commitment to helping Oliver and his father, and she knew she would do everything in her power to ensure they were treated with the respect and kindness they deserved. Sitting with Oliver and George, Emily reassured them that she would speak with the principal about the bullying and make sure the school addressed the issue. The day had been fraught with challenges, but Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. In the face of adversity, she had found a new path and a way to make a meaningful difference in the lives of those around her. As she hesitantly creaked open the gate, Emily was met with the stormy visage of her husband, his fury palpable and almost tangible. "Ah," Emily arrives, just as I dreaded, he spat with venomous sarcasm. "You're exactly who I've been searching for, and no matter whom I ask, no one seems to know a thing." Emily's confusion turned to frustration. "What on earth does this have to do with me? And why on earth are you here?" she demanded, her voice tinged with disbelief and hurt. Oscar's smirk was a sharp contrast to the storm brewing in his eyes. "Oh, you still ask questions? Did you know that your father deceived me, utterly and completely?" Emily's voice cracked with a mix of hurt and anger. "How on earth did he deceive you? What nonsense are you spouting? Oscar, have you completely lost touch with reality? You inherited everything from the will, and I was left with nothing. Have you forgotten that so soon?" Oscar's face darkened with bitter satisfaction. "Forget? No, darling, I haven't forgotten. But your father was a master of deception, a true conjurer of tricks. Just before he died, he drained the company's accounts dry, and now his business is on the brink of collapse." Emily's face mirrored her shock and confusion. "What are you insinuating? Did you not know any of this?" Her voice trembled with the weight of her disbelief. Oscar's tone grew more menacing. "Of course not. Did you think otherwise?" Emily shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "No, I had no idea. And how could you think I would?" Oscar's expression turned grim as he continued, his voice low and threatening. "You and your father are all the same, deceptive and conniving. He outwitted me at every turn. Mark my words, I will not let this slide. If you do not recover the money your father stashed away in hidden accounts, you will deeply regret it." Emily's heart sank as she heard his threats. "Are you threatening me? What did I do to deserve this?" "I'm hearing all this for the first time," she said through tears of frustration and betrayal. Yet Oscar's demeanor remained unyielding, as if he believed she was complicit in her father's schemes. After a dramatic and heavy silence, Oscar delivered his final blow, each word a dagger to her heart. "If you fail to find the money, you'll have only yourself to blame. I'll see to it that William is placed in a children's home, and you will lose your parental rights. And don't look at me with that helpless expression. I mean every word." At that moment, George Blair, who had been an unwitting observer, stepped forward with a steely resolve. "I don't think intimidation is the right approach, young man. Threatening a woman, particularly a young mother, is unconscionable." Oscar's lips curled into a derisive smile. "And who might you be?" "Emily's knight in shining armor. Spare me. He's just another old fool. Emily, find that money or your son goes straight to a shelter." William's anguished cry cut through the tension. "I don't want to go to a children's home, Dad. Why are you doing this? Why are you hurting Mom?" Oscar's reply was cold and devoid of empathy. "What kind of father am I to you? Do we have any real connection? What are you even talking about with that?" He stormed off towards his car, where his mistress, Sophie, waited. Emily was left standing in stunned silence, her heart breaking under the weight of her ex-husband's cruel revelations. Hot, bitter tears streamed down her face, and her hands shook uncontrollably as if the ground beneath her had crumbled away. George Blair, with a touch of sympathy in his voice, leaned closer. "Don't take it to heart, Emily. He's spewing lies. As always, he's nothing but a spineless coward. I've seen many like him, masters of empty threats, especially towards women." Emily managed a shaky, grateful smile. "Thank you for your support. It truly means a lot," she whispered, her voice laden with gratitude. George gave a dismissive wave. "Think nothing of it. If that brute dares to show his face again, I'll give him a piece of my mind." And a bit more besides. As Emily slowly began to regain her composure, she started to see things in a new light. It seemed her late father had left Oscar with a sinking ship of a business, devoid of financial support. But the mystery remained: where had all the money gone? After all, Oscar had inherited a company teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, laden with debt and issues. Emily had always known her father possessed a remarkable talent for business, a gift for maneuvering that ensured he was perpetually on the winning side. Yet, the extent of James Albertson's cunning was beyond anything she could have imagined. His scheme was a masterpiece of deception, a testament to his unparalleled skill. Even so, Emily herself remained detached from the intricate web her father had woven. She had no clue where the bulk of his fortune was hidden, and the few people she approached could offer no clarity or assistance. "How did your first day at work go?" Emily George Blair inquired, breaking through her troubled thoughts as he sat across the table from her. A smile tugged at Emily's lips. "I think it went well. I met Oliver Carroll and his father, Michael, the one who used to be a tractor driver." George's expression brightened noticeably. "I know him well. A good man indeed. It's just tragic how life has dealt him such a rough hand. If only he hadn't swerved that time to avoid an accident, he might have suffered far less." Emily sighed deeply, her heart aching for Michael. She felt genuine sorrow for him, caught in such a harsh twist of fate. Yet, in the grand scheme of things, her influence felt minimal. All she could do was support Oliver in his studies, helping him prepare for the new school year starting September 1st. Just thinking about Oliver brought a warm glow to her heart. He was such a kind and intelligent boy, his very presence seemed to uplift her spirit. The principal had done well by enrolling Oliver for the second year, a small but significant relief. Little did Emily know Thomas Brown, the principal, was grappling with his own set of concerns. With years of experience in the educational field, Thomas was acutely aware of the dangers posed by any scrutiny. He dreaded the possibility of an inspection that could uncover the misuse of school repair funds for his construction projects. Deep down, Thomas was secretly relieved at the prospect of the school's closure, as it would likely lead to his reassignment to a different institution. His indifference to Oliver's plight was clear, given that Oliver's father lacked a car and had no means of addressing the principal's indifference. Meanwhile, Oscar was ensnared in a web of his own making. The late James Albertson had cunningly set a trap when he asked Oscar to deliver the will to the notary. Oscar, with his keen yet misguided ambition, saw a gleam of opportunity and took a gamble. The outcome was catastrophic. He was now besieged by issues he had never anticipated. The creditors, relentless in their pursuit, demanded repayment of the debts, while competitors eyed the company, ready to seize it for a pittance. Oscar had become the ultimate scapegoat. Every thread of responsibility pointed squarely at him. He had forged the will in a desperate bid to claim the deceased's assets, but the reality was far grimmer. The company's accounts were as empty as Swiss cheese, and its employees were left in disarray, their hands thrown up in helpless resignation. At that moment, Oscar realized he had stumbled into an inescapable trap, one that threatened to devour him whole if he didn't find a way out. Naturally, Emily had no intention of pursuing a petition to strip her of her parental rights. What would be the point, especially when it was clear she likely did not know the whereabouts of the missing money? 3 days passed, during which Emily devoted extra time to working with Oliver and visiting his father, Michael. With Emily's arrival, Michael's spirits visibly lifted. The dimness that had shadowed his eyes began to fade, replaced by a newfound sparkle of joy. He started to joke and smile as if emerging from a long, dark stupor. This positive change extended to Oliver as well. The boy, once a timid soul plagued by self-doubt, gradually blossomed into a confident young individual. It was clear that what Oliver had been lacking was precisely the support and encouragement Emily provided. "I believe in you," Emily said warmly during a break between classes. "Don't let your classmates' opinions get you down. Soon, they'll look up to you and see you as a leader. Just stay persistent in your studies. And remember, try to be more restrained and avoid resorting to physical confrontations." "I'll do my best, though I'm not sure how far I can go," Oliver replied modestly, a hint of determination in his voice. As Emily continued to make a positive impact, the school principal's anxiety began to wane. No longer fearful of inspections, he could focus on his project building a country house with a scenic view of the forest and lake. Meanwhile, Oscar, overwhelmed by the cascading problems he faced, left Emily in relative peace for a while, providing her with much-needed respite. One evening, as Emily returned home from work, she noticed a sleek black SUV parked by the gate. Her heart skipped a beat. Had Oscar returned? And why was he driving a different car? How could he afford such an extravagant purchase? Did he sell his father's company at auction? Questions swirled in her mind. As she approached, a gray-haired man in his 50s, dressed like an office clerk, stepped out of the vehicle. "Emily Albertson?" the stranger asked, his voice calm and professional. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" Emily responded, her curiosity piqued. The man's face softened into a friendly smile as he shifted to a more informal tone. "I'm the attorney for your late father, James Albertson. He instructed me to personally deliver to you the details of the accounts where his money is held. These accounts are entirely transparent, and there will be no issues with the tax authorities. The funds are meant solely for you and are not connected to your ex-spouse." Emily's correction was barely audible. "Ex-spouse," she murmured. "Yes, exactly, ex-spouse." "I have no issue with that term," the attorney replied. "Additionally, I have an envelope to give you. I don't know what it contains, but your father gave it to me shortly before his death and specified that our meeting with you was to occur on this exact day. Not a day earlier, not a day later." With trembling hands, Emily accepted the packet of documents detailing the bank account information. She carefully placed the envelope into the side pocket of her blouse, intending to open it later. The attorney completed his task and bid her a polite farewell before driving away. Emily, her legs shaky and unsteady, found her way to a nearby bench, which tilted precariously to one side. Sitting down, Emily slowly opened the envelope. Inside, she discovered a letter from her father. The letter began with the heartfelt words, "My dearest daughter, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer with you. I apologize for the spectacle of the will, but I had no other choice. I needed to expose your husband, Oscar, by entrusting him with my will. I am nearly certain he will attempt to forge it and manipulate the situation to his advantage. Fortunately, I anticipated this. And Oscar will receive nothing. I have bequeathed him a failing business designed to cause him nothing but trouble and make him regret his betrayal. As for you, I leave you savings beyond the dreams of many. Use them wisely for yourself and the benefit of our grandson, William. Your father, James." As Emily read and reread the letter, her heart ached with a mix of relief and disbelief. "Oh God, is this true?" she sobbed, tears streaming down her cheeks. At the bottom of the envelope, she found a photograph of herself as a child, dressed in a light frock adorned with daisies, her bare feet peeking out from sandals. The sight of the photograph brought a fresh wave of emotions, underscoring the profound and personal connection between her and her father's final act of love and protection. "Mom, why are you crying? Did something happen?" "Did Dad hurt you again?" William asked, approaching with a look of genuine concern. Emily turned around, her face softening into a tender smile. "No, William, everything's all right. We're not going to be poor anymore, and we'll have the means to make all our dreams come true." "Wow, can we build a store like the one in town? And a playground and a water park?" the boy asked, his eyes wide with excitement. "Absolutely," Emily replied, her heart swelling with pride. "We just need to be patient for a little while." From that moment, their lives began to transform profoundly. Emily decided to invest a portion of the newfound funds into repairing the village school, a move that greatly dismayed the school's director. Her intervention revealed the true nature of Thomas Brown's scheme: self-serving and deceitful. With the school's future secured, George Blair, overwhelmed with emotion, couldn't contain his tears. He embraced Emily tightly, his voice choked with gratitude. "Thank you, Emily. You've restored my faith in fate." Emily's kindness extended beyond the school. Michael, who had been struggling with his prosthetics, received an invitation to one of the top prosthetic centers to select the perfect model for him. "Emily, I don't know how to thank you," Michael said, his voice trembling with emotion. Emily looked over at Oliver peeking out from the window and silently communicated, "See? I was right." Oliver, understanding the unspoken words, smiled and dashed outside to hug his beloved teacher. Tears of joy filled Emily's eyes as she embraced the boy. The firing of Thomas Brown left the school in need of a new principal. The community, united in their opinion, decided that Emily was the ideal choice. "But how can this be? I have no experience. I was only just hired," Emily protested, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. George Blair, however, was adamant. "Accept the position, Emily. Don't be stubborn. You're the perfect fit for this role, and the community trusts you. You've already invested so much of your own money into the repairs," he urged. Emily, overwhelmed by the support, shyly accepted and expressed her gratitude to everyone. "Wow, my mom is the school principal now," William exclaimed with delight. Emily, however, quickly set him straight. "Don't get too excited, buddy. I won't give you any special treatment. I'll be just as demanding with you as I am with everyone else. Remember, knowledge is light," she said firmly. "Ah, but sometimes it feels like darkness," Oliver quipped with a playful grin. Emily turned to see Michael standing proudly, holding his son's hand. To her astonishment, Michael was not only standing but walking with the aid of a cane. The rapid recovery seemed almost miraculous to Emily. About 3 months later, Emily and Michael were married in a modest ceremony by local standards. It was simple but perfect for them. The most significant aspect was finding each other in a small village where such miracles were rare. As for Oscar, he faced complete ruin. Having squandered everything he stole from his late father-in-law, he ultimately went bankrupt. Emily had used the funds to settle the company's debts and bought a controlling stake at auction for a fraction of its value. By the time of their divorce, Oscar was left with nothing. He sold his car, most of his personal belongings, and even his jewelry to survive. His former lover, Olivia, also faced misfortune, left with nothing after Oscar's downfall. The village school, now newly renovated, was bustling with students from surrounding villages. To accommodate the growing number of pupils, Emily even arranged for a school bus to cover the route. George Blair, having devoted his life to the school, was overjoyed. Watching the children rush to school with bright backpacks, he felt immense gratitude towards Emily and Michael for rejuvenating the village and giving it a new lease on life. As we wrap up today's story, we've witnessed a remarkable journey of transformation and redemption. Emily's journey from despair to hope, the exposure of deceit, and the eventual triumph of kindness and integrity highlight some powerful lessons. It's a testament to the impact of unwavering determination, the value of compassion, and the strength found in new beginnings. So what have you learned from this tale of resilience and renewal? Is there a particular lesson or insight that resonated with you? We invite you to share one thing you've learned and how you plan to incorporate it into your own life. Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video and found it inspiring, please leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more uplifting content. Thank you for watching and being part of our community.